So I had unfortunately not been able to get Chromecast and all the cool groovy gadgets working on the Wi-Fi, so I'm stuck hiding in the corner here. But tonight I'm going to give a bit of a lightning talk on introducing unit testing to your legacy code bases. So often we're focusing on building new code and building really cool things and testing that, but we forget to test all the old stuff that we've inherited over many years. So who am I? So I go online by the alias SydNerdRage. You've probably seen me tweeting a lot Sydphp. I also look after some of the Sydphp media behind the scenes. And you can find me online in various forms. So if you've got any feedback, let me know. Come and harass me afterwards. Always looking to have a good chat. Tonight, looking through fixing bugs. How are we going to introduce unit testing once we've fixed them? And then how actually set up PHPUnit to run. A lot of the time, people will say, I'll just use PHPUnit. But it's another thing to actually go in and set up, have a look at how some of the existing config works. And I'm a bit of a continuous integration evangelist, so of course I want everyone to automate their testing and do so as much as possible. So this is a bug that we encountered probably about 2 months ago now in a code base. I don't expect everyone to look through the code. All the code samples I'm putting up on screen tonight are just as an example. I don't expect everyone to be able to read the text. In fact, it's probably better that you don't try and read the code and just see it as a bit of a visual example. But what this horrible piece of regex is actually doing is searching for what look like HTML entities that are missing the semicolon and then adding the semicolon. Now we had a bug in this that was actually adding semicolons after a brand name that had an ampersand at the beginning, and the brand had no space. So I thought, hey, this is an incomplete HTML entity. I need to add a semicolon. Really helpful, right? You might find this bug in an old version of Expression Engine. This is actually EE Core from 1.5 or 1.6, if anyone still has the delight with working with it. And so instead of just going in and fixing the regex, as so often you're tempted to do, just hack in a quick fix and get on with the more interesting stuff. Instead I thought, no, let's fix this properly. We've got a problem here with, first of all, correctly identifying invalid HTML entities and then fixing them, because there are other parts of our code base that depend on this functionality. So I figured, well, let's abstract out this single line of code. Let's take away the regex and just replace it with a call off to some other entity. So here I have a validate util class, a static call to correct incomplete HTML entities, and the ongoing string that I'm using to validate against. Now inside this class, yes, unfortunately we don't use 5.3 yet, so I do have to use includes at the top. We're working on it, but this is quite an old code base. So inside here I have one method that is correct incomplete HTML entities with this string. So I have a new entity filter. I then step through that and I ask it to find tokens that are missing semicolons in this string. Now, really long method names, some people love, some people hate. It's a strategy I've inherited from working with Dave for a while. And the primary reason here is because I want to describe in as much detail what I'm doing, so that a future programmer in another 6 years can come past, there we go, can come past and actually figure out what we're doing. So once I've found all the tokens that are missing semicolons in this string, I'm simply fixing that malformed entity. So I've taken away the regex and I've replaced it with the 2 key steps that I'm logically completing here. Now to step into this filter object, I have 2 functions. First of all, I want to find the tokens that are missing the semicolons, and then I want to fix them. That's essentially what we were doing in the regex, but now I'm abstracting out to 2 separate methods. When I find the missing semicolons, I still use a regex. Now, a couple of people that are really regex gurus can probably find a few bugs in this. I did. This is a very early iteration of the bug fix. But essentially, I find all the tokens I can, and then I return those tokens out of the method. So all I've identified now is everything that I think is missing a semicolon, and I return it out of my string. I've also got a method which is to fix a malformed entity. Now this is a single entity in the string, it's not all of them. And here what I do is I first check to see that that entity is actually in the translation table. there are various sets of HTML entities, and I don't always want to be correcting all of them. I might want to restrict that. So here, it's quite simple. I check to see if the entity I've been passed is actually an HTML entity. I then replace it with the semicolon, and I spit it out of my method. So that in itself is a really simple method that I can now test. So now I can set up a test case. I don't have a single line of code that's doing multiple things. I have two specific pieces of logic, and I know what they're meant to do. So I have a test for missing tokens being found, and I have a test for actually correcting that entity within a string. Now here I'm starting to use PHPUnit. What I've got is a series of input data and some strings, and I've put at the end here an array of the entities I'm expecting my method to find. In the first one here, I'm expecting a non-breaking space, and in the second example, I'm expecting it to find both the non-breaking space and an ampersand. Now, further down here, I'm using my filter, and I'm actually asserting that the array returned out of my method matches my expected entities. Okay? So all I'm doing here is I'm ensuring that one part of my code is working as expected. If I find that there's another case that I'm missing, I can add that case in quite quickly. I don't have to go searching for this bug again. I can test it with my testing suite. The second test I've written here is to verify that I can actually replace an incorrect entity with the correct one, with the fixed semicolon at the end. And again, I have a simple input string, a simple output string, and I compare, and I assert equals, that what I'm expecting is actually what I get. Now these are PHPUnit functions that are actually inherited through building up your test cases. There's a lot of really good documentation around that, and I'll try and post a couple of good links on the meetup group so you can actually go and have a look at these. But this is some really basic PHPUnit functionality that I'm using to assert and improve the fact that I've actually fixed this bug. My manager, my producers can come back to me and go, Jack, you know, it's not working. And I can add in their further examples to my test cases to verify that I haven't just hacked in a solution, I've now proved that it's working. Now PHPUnit, the XML file is something that's often skipped over, and this is a really basic example of how you can set up PHPUnit. You can bootstrap it with a PHP file that runs, and most of the time people use Composer's auto-loading file in here. But you can add your own sort of loading methods so that your code, your test suite, can find all of your functions and all of your classes. Now you can, in PHPUnit, set up multiple test suites, different sections of your code. The simplest way is to simply put in a directory, and any classes it finds within there, it will try and see if they're a test case. So this is the most simple PHPUnit file you can set up. Now running PHPUnit is also quite straightforward. Yes, admittedly, this is an old version, we have old code, but it works really simply. I tell it to run in my directory, where I have my XML file, and each of these dots here is one of the test cases running. And a dot simply means, yep, that one's running fine. So as I build up over time, I've now introduced these unit tests, and every time I change the code, I can prove that it's still working. It's really quite quick. I've only got 3 tests in here. But as you start to run the tests in some of the larger frameworks, you can find that they run for a minute or 2. To actually have a look at how all this is set up, I have a GitHub repo that I use to scaffold a brand new project. It's called Foundation, and in here I've got my source files, and most importantly my PHPUnit. And all I have to do is I have to go into here, change the root namespace that I want to be testing, and everything else in my project is now set up to do fully automated PHPUnit testing. Now I promised I'd touch on a bit of automation, because you can run a test suite and you can always forget to run it on your local computer, but you hook it up with GitHub or Bitbucket, with any sort of continuous integration service, and it can actually tell you when you've stuffed up. So one of the things I like to do is in Composer, I tell it which version of PHPUnit to run. A lot of hosted services will pre-install it for you, but at least now I know exactly what version I'm running, because PHPUnit itself occasionally has bugs and they fix them. So I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with here. Again, instead of running PHPUnit that's pre-installed, on the left-hand side here, or right-hand side, sorry, I'm running the PHPUnit I've installed through Composer. Again, I have complete control over the environment I'm testing in. Now, the extra details here is for some of the code coverage tools that I run. I like to integrate with CodeShip and a couple of other tools. And this extends my test suite to actually figure out how much code I've covered. Right? In the test suite I've shown you through the last few slides, I've covered 99%. I think there's a small corner case that I haven't. And I can then prove to myself, I'm not just testing a small amount of my code, but I know that my code is running quite smoothly across all of my lines of code. And the other thing I wanted to touch on for people that are more familiar with PHPNet, and this is something I've started to adopt, is I actually build my test mocks in my mock data classes, and I put them in a different namespace. There's no harm in doing so. It means you can quite easily inject different mocks. And instead of running PHPNet directly, I've got different scripts that will run different parts of my test suite. Sometimes I just want to run my unit tests, just make sure that my business logic is running. Other times I might run a full integration test with databases, external services, all the API keys pre-configured. So by breaking this out into little scripts and different config files, it gives me a lot more control and flexibility over which environment I'm running in and which test suites I'm running. So if you're more familiar with PHPNet and integrated testing, this is perhaps a strategy you might look to use in a new project. That's it from me. Hopefully it's given anyone new to unit testing an introduction to how you can use on your existing code bases, but also anyone that's been somewhat familiar with testing for a while, hopefully you've been able to take away a new strategy to doing your mocks and other sections of your code base. Get in touch. I'm always looking for feedback or thoughts to bring to the meetup group. And if you did manage to find the bug in my regex there at the beginning, I'm more than happy to shout your beer. So hopefully you don't.
It'll be in production code by tomorrow.
Too late.
Alrighty folks, thanks for that, Jack. That's great. I'm thinking probably a good idea for us to take a very quick break. And I have heard a rumour on the grapevine that if someone was interested in giving a lightning talk, there might be a grand prize. What? Oh, there might be a grand prize.
What is that? You talking deeply into their voice?
That's a different kind of grand prize. You can have that for free because you've got an awesome beard, Justin. Awesome. Alrighty. So yeah, from that point of view, if you are interested in getting up and giving a quick 5-minute talk about something that we might all find interesting, if we get a few people, then we can work out which one should deserve the grand prize. Otherwise, we might just have to have the grand prize all to ourselves, and that would be a shame, wouldn't it? And maybe you're the only person who is brave enough to volunteer. Anyway, I know this is extremely exciting for everybody, but we'll take a break now, enjoy maybe a quick drink, and then we'll catch up in 10 minutes' time. See you shortly, folks. Cheers.
Inside the ship, they've got disco ball. Yeah, I'm going to use it. It's like here's the answer. Yeah. Just